Am I a literary snob? I was just reading an article the other day that made the point that you should never apologise for what you read. People read whatever they enjoy, whatever entertains them, whatever touches them in some way, whatever grabs hold of them. There's no need to feel guilty about it, although sometimes we do talk about reading a particular genre as a guilty pleasure. Although I don't come across much that interests me lately, I do enjoy reading science fiction and fantasy as well as what might be called more sophisticated literature. I don't look down on these genres, but it is true that some people do look down on Dan Brown and other popular writers and on science fiction, fantasy, and so on. I try not to look down on genre fiction. If I don't read much other genre fiction, it's not because I look down on it, it's just because it doesn't appeal to me. I'm not a fan of thrillers, political, legal, or any other kind. I'm not a fan of action novels. I do make an exception though with Dan Brown. I do look down on Dan Brown. I think he's a terrible writer and has a terrible editor. But what I actually find, rather than snobbery on the side of those who like more literary fiction, I think the snobbery is actually on the other side. People look at you sideways if you say you prefer to read something that might be called literature, and even more so if you aspire to write it. It's regarded as pretentious if you're concerned with form and language rather than just a story. But some people care about the words they put on the page, and they care about the words that they read there, as much as they care about plot, action, and conflict. I feel the need to defend this point of view somewhat, because it's this type of writing that is being excluded from the market, not the Dan Browns of this world. There will always be Dan Browns and people who love to read them, but will there ever be another Tolstoy or D.H. Lawrence or John Steinbeck? I have no problem with reading as a form of entertainment any more than I object to a movie that seeks only to entertain and make money, of course. But I feel that we're gradually losing sight of writing as a form of art, as opposed to simply a form of entertainment. At the very least, it's pushed to the distant margins, much as cinema as a form of art and music as a form of art are also, to some extent, marginalised. I actually do feel sometimes that I must apologise because I didn't write thrillers or young adult paranormal or romance or erotica. So the snobbery works in both ways. But it's not the Dan Browns who are struggling to gain an audience these days. People need little encouragement to read Dan Brown or John Grisham. They need a great deal more encouragement to read Peter Carey or Hilary Mantel. Much of the great literature of the past would not see the light of day if it were written today. And I don't just mean because of the change of writing style over the last 100 or 150 years or so. And I suspect that much of the great literature of today is not gaining the readership that it deserves either. There's almost a tendency to sneer at a book that wins the Booker Prize or any other literary prize. I read literature, but I also read science fiction and fantasy. What I hope is that people who love to read thrillers don't only read thrillers. Step out of your comfort zone. Go and buy a Booker Prize winning book. It will be a different experience, but not necessarily any less satisfying.